International Schools. So Wilmington.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's what the state agreed.
Yeah.
All right, now we're live. We're live now.
Thank you.
We could sit down.
And we landed Ronald Reagan mistake with a hot mic. Remember that?
No, which one was it?
He was similar to this, waiting for something to start and waiting for a specific time. He didn't realize there was a hot mic, and he said he'd been bombing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
He was like,
Yeah, I remember that one.
Google what?
begin bombing the Russians in 5 or something to that effect.
Yeah,
And
something like
they
that.
caught it. And
I remember that one. You didn't get much good press over that one.
no,
That was no.
Allison, as long as your hair's combed, you're good. 'Cause they can get the back of your head.
Which one was it?
I don't know.
Or we hear a beep when somebody calls in.
Good morning. Calling the regular meeting of the Union County Board of Commissioners to order Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. Again, it's 9 o'clock. And in a continuing effort to limit the spread of COVID-19 virus and to comply with Oregon Governor's executive order, the Board of Commissioner meeting will facilitate citizen participation via teleconference. Is there anyone on the line as of right now?
Good morning, Susanna with the Union County Chamber is on the line.
Good morning, Susanna. Welcome. Would you please join me in a salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment from the phone first.
Nothing on my end, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the room? Okay. Elected official, department head, employee comments. Seeing none, we will move to the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second it.
Been properly moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Sparkle?
Aye.
Commissioner Beveridge?
Aye.
Commissioner King?
Aye. Administrative matter, court order 2020-14's acceptance of summary of BOPTA action.
Yes, as part of the BOPTA process, it's necessary for the Board of Commissioners to enter an order that accepts the summary of the actions taken by the Board of Property Tax Appeals. Commissioner Scarfo serves as the chairman of that board. They held meetings on February 18 and reviewed petitions. The summary of actions is attached to the court order. It looks like initially there were 18 accounts appealed. 8 of those were withdrawn prior to hearing. 2 were stipulated under the appropriate ORS, which resulted in 8 actual appeals. Of those 8 appeals, all of the accounts were sustained, and the value, the assessed value before adjustments and after adjustments is the same at $19,089,594. This was presented by Margot Terhegan, who was the clerk of the BOPTA, and requires your approval to conclude that process for this tax.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I'd like to say that our tax assessor's office is fantastic. They did a really great job.
I will make a motion to approve court order 2020-14.
I second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to accept the summary of actions by the Board of Property Tax Appeals court order 2020-14. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to reiterate that our tax assessors department did a fantastic job. And we actually had some appeals this year at BOPTA, which was new for us. And I think we handled it great. And like I said, Cody and his crew over there are fantastic. And that's why a lot of them didn't come to BOPTA, is because he cleared everything up prior and saved us a lot of time. So.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Pepper?
Aye.
Commissioner Beveridge? Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner
Item B, surveyor compensation agreement.
Yes, you have before you a compensation agreement that would be between Union County and Rick Robinson, who is the elected county surveyor. I provided you with a staff report that explained that earlier this year, actually toward the end of 2019, we became aware of an investigation being done by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission with regard to a surveyor of another county. And it had to do with the fact that the surveyor was receiving compensation without an agreement in place. And the surveyor also operated a private business, which is not unusual for surveyors in smaller counties. The Ethics Commission had investigated that, and they did what they call a letter of education to that surveyor, but it pointed out some flaws they saw in the process that was being utilized. So I worked with our county legal counsel, Wyatt Wong, and Rick Robinson to review the way Union County was compensating our surveyor. And we felt that it would be wise for us to put in place an actual agreement, making it very clear how we were doing it. We're not changing anything about the way we were doing it. We just didn't have an agreement in place. And we did include the actual fee for services that was provided, so that it was really clear, so that we would avoid any potential problems for our surveyor. So that's what you have before you, and I can answer questions, hopefully, if you have any.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve this agreement.
I'll second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the surveyor compensation agreement. Discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Scarpa?
Aye.
Commissioner Beveridge? Aye. Commissioner Pepper?
Next up is novel coronavirus COVID-19 emergency leave policy.
Yes, for your consideration today is a new policy, and it's entitled Union County Novel Coronavirus COVID-19 Emergency Leave Policy. This is prepared in response to the federal laws and Oregon laws that have been adopted regarding employees and some new protected leave and paid leave available to employees impacted by the COVID-19. The draft for this policy came from the attorneys at City County Insurance Services. And those are the folks who I rely on quite a bit to make sure that we're in compliance with the laws and things with regard to employees. I've also reviewed it with our local legal counsel, Wyatt Long. And it covers all of the required things in both the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which is the federal law, and then the Oregon Family Leave Act, the changes to that. It impacts both FEMLA and OPLA. I think you've all heard of both of those before. It allows protected leave for certain family related items. I won't go through all of it. I'm sure that you've all read it. It's a little bit complicated because each case could be a little bit different. My intent, if you approve this policy, is to notify all of the employees that you have adopted a policy, which is a requirement, and to give them the summary. The Bureau of Labor and Industries, BOLI, has prepared a poster that I will distribute to employees via email. Normally, we're required just to post those in workplaces, but because we have employees doing telecommuting and not a lot of employees currently in their workplaces, we'll distribute it via email. And what I'll do is encourage employees that if they have specific questions about their circumstance or how that might work, that they contact me and we'll go over the specifics of it to try and identify what benefits they might be entitled to over that. It's just really difficult to explain in a lot of hypothetical situations. It's better to just look at the circumstances that we arise. So that would be my intent moving forward. These new laws do become effective. We have to do the notice today, and the benefits are available beginning April 1st on some and April 2nd on others. So that's kind of a broad summary.
I would make a motion to approve the novel coronavirus COVID-19 emergency leave policy.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the COVID-19 emergency leave policy. Discussion.
Thank you for your work on that, Shelley, and keeping up with everything that's going on with this. I know it's overwhelming, but thank you very much for everything you do.
Seeing no further discussion, call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Sarko?
Aye.
Commissioner Weber?
Aye.
Commissioner Grant?
Next up is the Blue Mountain Translator District funding assistance request. Please.
Yes, we had spoken at the last commission meeting about televising the commission meetings, and Alex McCaddick, the executive director of the Blue Mountain Translator District, had spoken briefly about that. And then we had talked about that becoming available. At the time we spoke, it was indicated there would be no cost to the county for that to happen. The Translator District, after that time, received their proposals back from the vendors and found that the amount they had budgeted was a bit short of the needed funds. And so Alex had reached out to me to see whether or not Union County could help support the shortfall there for the proposals that they had received. The shortage was $5,000, and they are requesting $1,000 of the county, from the county for that. Alex is here if you have specific questions, or Alex, if you'd like to add anything to that.
Morning, commissioners. Again, Alex McCaddick, Translator District. So everything Shelley said is pretty much on point. There's not a whole lot to add to it. I did print out some copies of the supplemental budget we passed to take care of general expenses. So if you wanted to review that, there are copies here. Again, the main thing was that playout system ended up being about $5,000 more than we expected. We have signed the contract with the vendor to purchase it, and checks are going to be cut later today. It's just a big hit that we weren't expecting to take until later this year. Usually our cash flow system works kind of like the way it goes is that in June, we usually get about 35% of our revenue for the year from the people who pay their initial service charges. The other 35% comes in fall when people pay property taxes, and the other 30% kind of comes scattered throughout the year without really a lot of predictability. The key thing for us right now is that we expected to buy this playout system in the summer when we had a bunch of money in the budget again. So basically what we're doing is buying this early, and we didn't have enough money in the budget to go for that. So that's why we're asking for assistance.
So, and to clarify, are you asking for a loan?
The grant.
Grant?
And it's a one-time cost,
Yes.
and you're asking for $1,000 from us towards this 5,000.
Yes.
And in the event that the other folks that you've identified that you were going to ask for funding are unable to with the plan?
And we're just going to kind of have to eat it for now. I know a lot of people are going into budget crunches, and this is kind of the best we have at this point.
I'm having a tough, I'm a big supporter of this, and I know that what it's for and why you need it, and I get it, but I'm worried it's almost like a bailing you out for missed budgeting. And if another group does the same thing, we'll just go to the county and ask the county. I know it's only $1,000. I mean, I'm not gonna, $1,000 is a lot of money, but where does this end? I don't know how we stop, how do we say no to others that do the same thing? That's where I'm kind of worried.
And again, I'm not here to beat you up, but we've got companies laying off darn near hundreds of people. Other media outlets have laid off a bunch of their people, and I'm struggling with this. I'm not gonna lie. And I understand there's an immediate need for you, but what kind of deadline do you have on this?
So I think the system should be up and running next week. So sooner we can get some funding to get this all up and running, the better. When it comes to, I said misbudgeting earlier, it wasn't so much misbudgeting. We had planned to buy this later this year. We don't have the money right now. Okay.
And it's because of the timing of the coronavirus, and you're having to
Yeah,
start earlier than you planned.
Exactly. Yeah, we're only doing this right now because we think that we can get all this information out.
Going back to Commissioner Anderson's idea, but I don't like giving out loans either. But at the same time, it's like, hey, can we lend them $1,000 until you get more money down the road? That's not. I know we're not here for loaning. Maybe you could, Shelley could help with that. Could we? Or
It's not something that we've typically done, but we would have the ability to do so. It would be either decision that you make, I think, is, as you mentioned, potentially precedent setting. And so I would encourage you to think about that, because our resources are, limited as well. So.
I'm afraid we're going to open that door.
Who all will this benefit?
So ultimately, our goal is that we're going to be providing live meeting services to every local government agency in the area that wants it: school board, city council, special districts. Anybody needs to do this type of distance meeting participation, it's going to benefit everybody who wants it. In addition, we're going to have live alerting capabilities like again to JP Brock and other people in the area that needs to get a message out instantly to everybody who's watching the TV channel or who's watching our live stream. JP will be able to just log in and go, hey, this is a thing you need to see right now.
I think what you're doing is very important, especially in this time with this situation. So I don't want to be precedent setting, but at the same time, we're in the middle of an unusual situation where I do feel the live streaming is important. So I don't know. I'm leaning towards helping with this for the fact that it's gonna help many people, and it's gonna help with, being able to get the word out and not having people have to be in the same room and safety.
I will add to this, one of the things that's been updated, Sinclair Broadcast Group is allowing us to use one of the local TV channel sub-channels. So everybody who has an antenna will be able to watch what's coming here. The translated district's typical audience really has translated district TV service because they don't have the other option. They don't have broadband access, or they're able to go to Facebook to check Joint Information Center, that kind of thing. So, you know, a typical client for us would be a 90-year-old wolf person who sits on his couch all day and sits with people don't really bring them. And that's kind of the at-risk population right now, is the elderly, the people who are kind of lower income, and that's helping them there.
So ballpark, and not specifically, how many subscribers do you have in Union County?
Union County usually has about 2/3 of our total subscription base. Part of our problem has always been figuring out who actually uses the translated district service.
Subscribers.
So people who paid this year is going to be probably about 1,000 or so. So of 1,000 of those subscribers, have picked up 660 in that range. But we always believe, I think probably about 3,000 people in total in Union and Baker counties use our TV service. I know majority homes, Cove and North Powder all have antennas on them. And we find hundreds of new ones every year.
I know there's a lot of people using it that aren't necessarily.
You know, the visual aid I used at a committee here in Salem last year is I've got an antenna size bracelet that fits around my wrist. I can't charge somebody for using something that small in their home. And that's the problem for us. So of the people who are honest and paying for it, there's probably 1,000. This was a little more than that. But I think it's probably more around 3,000 in total that are being served in both counties.
So have you went to other counties to get some of this other money, part of the 5,000?
Yeah, I've reached out to some of the other local government agencies. IMESD is one we were talking to because we had to look into some more educational videos that are kind of better for Union County, including Native American curriculum Department of Education is going to be providing, and we're asking Baker County as well. But they're going to look at getting FEMA to help us pay for this. So that's one route you could go. You could Baker County contact FEMA for some funding to get it done.
Shelley, does that sound like something?
Well, if you were looking at it from an emergency education standpoint, that type of thing, it could be something that we could identify as one of our costs and submit to them, but that's going to be one of those items that it has to go through the process of public assistance through that. So I believe you could make the case that it would be an eligible expense under that program, but the reimbursement decision isn't guaranteed.
Right.
We would be satisfied.
I did speak with JV, and I don't know if he had a chance to speak with you or not, but I did share with him the information that Alex had provided about the potential opportunities there for emergency services and the JIC to access it. So he is aware of it. We didn't really talk about, you know, the funding.
I'm still kind of torn on this. Yeah. It's kind of but under our circumstances, yes, I think it's a good tool for those 660 people or plus to get information out to their homes. If that's the only form they have, then, I mean, under this circumstance, I get it. But yeah, just worried about the down the road.
Can you, and I don't want to push this out, but
Please be open and honest. I appreciate it.
can you wait till the 15th for a decision? Are you comfortable with that? So we accept a motion to postpone until the 15th.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to postpone this till the 15th of April, our next regular Board of Commissioners meeting. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm going to reiterate what Commissioner Scarpo said. It's not that we're against it, but we're just, my concerns are that we're opening up Pandora's box. And we too are looking at budget shortfalls and starting right now. So,
yeah.
I appreciate your patience on that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks,
Thank you,
Alex.
Alex. So, we probably need to vote on that.
Commissioner Scarpelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Under administrative matters, P, tax funding allocation recommendation on transient room tax.
And I apologize, this one I really should wait until after you've done your 9:30 consideration of the transient tax ordinance, because the discussion and the recommendation or the decision I'm asking on it would be premature if I did it before the ordinance. So may I postpone that until after the ordinance at 9:30?
Most certainly.
We went through things faster than I thought we would, so.
Yeah, so we have 8 minutes. Can we bump down to good of the order? Commissioner Scarpa?
I don't even know where to begin.
Commissioner Beveridge?
There's so much.
Commissioner Beveridge?
I would just say that, our biggest concern is, when this is all, safety of people right now, so it doesn't spread. And in the future, keeping our businesses in business and trying to get back to normal as quick as we can. So it's, a fine line. I want to compliment our emergency services, our sheriff's department, the CHD, the many people that are, our medical people that are working so hard, and we will get through it, but those are our highest priorities right now. So all the other meetings we've had are pretty much going to phone conversations or Zoom and kind of being, stopped. So please have patience with us as we get through this.
And again, to echo that, I want to thank the Joint Information folks, the interdisciplinary team that they've stood up as of, I want to say, was that Monday? I'm kind of losing track of days.
It was.
Okay. Incident management team in particular, and I am cautious doing this because I don't want to forget anybody, and if I do, I apologize. But clearly, JB Brock, Terry Brigiotti, Annette Powers, Shelley, thank you for everything you've done, and Allison, thank you for making all these arrangements to keep business as usual, as close to usual as possible under trying times.
You guys did, that was fantastic. Yeah, what they said. Yeah, I've had so much going on here. I don't even,
Right.
With everything else, my other hats, and it's been pretty brutal. A lot of people waiting for Friday. The Fed announcement for the $2 trillion proposal to the banks is going to be announced on Friday. So everybody's going to be running to the banks on Friday.
Or the windows of the banks.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so we've got a 4.5 minute recess. Anything on the phone?
Susanna?
Sorry, my phone is in my pocket, I was on mute. No, I don't have anything right now. We are just trying to keep our website updated, get information from a number of different sources. I try to post those at least once a day, and then we're just trying to compile everything and send it out. A couple of our newsletters once or twice a week with all of that information kind of compiled together.
And thank you for what you're doing.
I don't know, Alex, are you still on?
Yeah.
Okay, we're in recess.
I'm gonna go take a walk.
Okay. 2020-1, revisions of transient room tax. Staff report, please, Shelley.
Yes, we have been talking about revisions to our transient room tax ordinance, specifically section 15 for several months now. We began with a couple of work sessions, and we had the first hearing on ordinance 2020-01 back on March 18th. And specifically what this changes is the funding allocations and the categories under which we will distribute the transient room tax moving forward. It also creates a different advisory committee. We're going to call it the Transient Tax Advisory Committee. We had one previously, the makeup of which many of the organizations are no longer active. And so this would have a 7-member committee that would help in 2 of the categories, those being community event funding and discretionary fund grants. And it clarifies the process for applying for transient room tax funds and the categories that would be eligible. We have made the ordinance available. It's been posted on our website to us, and the work sessions have been published several times. So there's been opportunity for input into the ordinance. You haven't received a lot of public comment or input. There were some discussions early on in the work sessions from folks interested, but haven't received much in the way of comments on the ordinance itself. The process would be you approve the first reading at that March meeting, and so it is ready and available for the second reading and your approval and adoption today if you're ready to do that.
Any public comment from the phone?
Not for me, thank you.
Any other public comment? Discussion?
I think this is a good way to do it, Shelley, and like you said, many of those people that used to be on the committee, that they aren't even, those places aren't even running anymore. So I like the committee that we're putting together. I like the different sections and reasons that people can come forward. It's a little more defined, and so I'm on board with it.
I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve ordinance 2020-01.
Second.
Thank you. It has been properly moved and seconded to approve ordinance 2020-1 in the matter of revising the Union County Transient Room Tax Ordinance from 2011. Discussion?
Good job, Shelley. Thank you very much
Thank
for all
you.
your hard work.
Call for the vote.
Commissioner Scarpa?
Aye.
Commissioner Beveridge? Aye. Commissioner Band?
Aye. And we will go back up the agenda to administrative matters, tax funding allocation recommendation. Shelley, please.
Okay, the ordinance that you just approved does indicate that the Board of Commissioners will annually identify an amount to be appropriated from the transient room tax for distribution. And so this is kind of a tough one given the current circumstances that we're in, but I felt like it was wise for us to at least talk about it today. The timeline that we had identified for the processes.
Am I missing something? Because I don't know that I have that list. I don't. Thank you. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Sorry about that. Let's see. The timeline that we had identified in the ordinance indicates that once we have identified the amount of funding by categories, that would then put into motion the review by the committee that will be appointed with regard to the events and any discretionary fund grants. It would also trigger presentations from the tourist attractions the Chamber of Commerce and the Tourism Promotion, which we would typically want to do in May. The challenge that I'm facing this year in giving you this information is trying to identify an appropriate number to start with in the transit room tax funding. What we're seeing right now is going to affect the current fiscal year, and we've already taken those actions for this fiscal year. So what I put before you is based on, I guess, the assumption that by July 1, the transient room tax would resume collections at a similar rate as to what we saw last year in July. Now, whether that will come to be or not, I don't know. But I thought to start the conversation, that's where I came up with the $208,000 figure that you see in the memo. It is about what we would have collected this year had we continued on the trend that we were doing up until February, March. And so it's difficult to know whether or not we will hit that goal for next fiscal year. So what I would suggest is we've got a couple of options. You could either, talk about this number and decide if you feel like it's reasonable, but with any of our deliberations going forward about this funding, we can make sure folks understand that it's contingent upon the fact that collections resume and that we do that. Otherwise, we'll have to withhold funding. So it's like, well, we'll allocate this much if we do in fact collect it. If not, we'll have to make reductions based on what we do collect. For the current fiscal year that we're in, I believe that we'll be able to honor the commitments that we've already made for this fiscal year because we had a bit of a beginning fund balance in our transient room tax, and we hadn't budgeted to expend everything that we would collect. So even with potentially the last 4 months of our fiscal year with the transit room tax lacking, I think we can honor the things that we've made, but we won't start with a balance moving forward. So if collections don't resume in July, then we would be forced to adjust this because there won't be any funds to start with to make up for. And that's the reason over the years we have never allocated to spend exactly what we get so that we could kind of keep it even, which for this year is going to be a benefit to those entities that we support. But it's something we may not have going forward if we allocate at this level. So that's what, the 208,000 prior to a couple months ago, I felt was a really good figure. It was reasonable. Felt sure we would reach that and probably have a little bit more. And now, everyone's guess is just that, it's a guess. So that was what I had come up with for a proposed starting figure. And it would have represented a 2% increase over the collection from 18-19. So because I didn't know what 19-20 would be yet. So I felt like it was a good figure. And then the next part of the ordinance is the categories. And what I did was I identified the categories that we just included in the ordinance. Those are tourism promotion, the Union County Chamber of Commerce, the Small City Chamber of Commerce, the tourist attractions or facilities, events, and then discretionary fund grants. I put in suggested numbers there. Those are totally at that's all up to you. There's no specific amounts. What I did base it on was a 2% increase in the tourism promotion and Chamber of Commerce because those were categories that did exist before, and then increase the small city chamber amounts because they had not been increased in many years. And then after splitting between the tourist attractions, facilities, and events, increase the discretionary fund grants by $5,000 so that balanced out to the 208. Again, those are suggestions. They can be adjusted. The thought there was if the committee knew how much money was available in the events category when they're reviewing all the events applications, they could keep that in mind as they distributing. What I didn't want them to do was get maybe, I don't know, $60,000 worth of applications and say, oh, these are all look good, and recommend them to you guys, and for us to say, yeah, we don't have that much money. So I thought it would be better to give them a target number, and so that's kind of the way I was trying to make it work. So that kind of leaves us in the position of deciding whether or not you want to allocate the number, high or low, what I've suggested, and then the categories.
On the events, Shelley, how does that compare to last year?
We didn't fund
We didn't,
events out of
we didn't have a
transit tax
specific
last year.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. And I like your summary at the end. I appreciate that. I think it looks good.
So, and because I don't know, I'm gonna ask, is the amount of money that we provided the chamber for the management of Blue Mountain Conference Center, was that out of these funds in the past, or is that a different fund?
It was out of these funds in the past,
Okay.
and what I would think, my interpretation would be that the conference center would be an attraction or a facility. So if you were going to fund continued support of the conference center, it would be in that category along with the other attractions that might be funded. But yes, it was typically
Okay.
funded out of transit.
And I guess, I mean, and I very much appreciate the work that the chamber does, and Susanna in particular, but I don't know that we want to be budgeting, especially when we don't know, money for an event or for a role that we're no longer assuming. So that would probably be something that I would want to address. And then the other is, I would suggest that we contact, especially the chamber and the small city chambers, and say, keep in mind, this is an estimate we may not get, so we may not want to count on. These are not guarantees, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
So, and I would assume that everyone knows that, but I just want to be super above board and say, hey, if we don't get the money, you're not getting the money.
Sorry this happened, Shelley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it all nice and tidy.
Yeah, I was like, oh no. Because we really don't know. What unknowns.
Well, with that money that was going to the MCC, that can kind of be a contingency a little bit for now to see what happens there.
Well, it would be, it's in this category for the facilities. So if you didn't allocate money for facilities at all, yes. And I guess at the point, and the discretionary fund grants, we wouldn't have any applications for those, and we could say, until we get more money, we're not going to do any discretionary fund grants this year. You could approach it a lot of different ways. If we got, 90% of what we thought we were going to do, you could choose to either reduce each category by 90%, or you could choose to take a category off the table for this particular year. You really do have flexibility. The challenge is that, as Chair Andrews mentioned, is that they're building their budgets too,
Right.
and they're putting these numbers potentially into them. But I will be very clear that, we're doing this ahead of time to help with planning, but it could all be impacted. It will all be impacted by collections. If we don't have tourism in July and August, those are our biggest months for collecting the transient room tax. They will definitely affect the outcome over the year, for the fiscal year. But we'll have a better idea come July and August what that's going to look like when their budget years start. But I don't know if it's good for us to wait until then to plan. We could say we're not going to make any allocations or any decisions until then, and just let folks know that because of the uncertainty this year, we're going to do our process differently, and then we could resume our timeline the next year if everything is back to what we had thought would be normal. You can certainly do that. You could wait a month, you can wait. You can really do it however you'd like to do. I will communicate with the folks whichever way we go. It's like, okay, we're gonna move forward and go through these allocation processes, but keep in mind that it's all subject to what we collect, or we're gonna delay our process and see where we're at. You know, it's really up to you guys how we do it.
And Shelley, we were talking about a different process for people to apply for that money. For example, on the events, where they have to, you know, report back to us on what they spent the money on, that kind of thing. So is that the next step after you get this?
Right, the next step would be, well, in my mind, the next step would have been, once these allocations were made, I would provide notification that there's funding available, and we'll use the event category. There's funding available for events in fiscal year 2020-21. Here's the application and the application process, and here's the deadline. And send that out to known events and make public notice of it. We would accept those applications, and then the committee would review them and recommend the funding allocation for the full year, so that would be done at one time. They would all know. The discretionary fund would be, as it has before, we would take those applications as needed. But there's definitely an application form that would require a report back on the use of funds.
Which will be different than what people are used to, so.
Correct.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I feel the way you built this, I feel good, because I feel like even if tourism dollars go down, we could, this is just my guess, it's anybody's guess, that we would still be able to pretty much keep those two numbers that you have for tourism and the chamber, so they could feel like, you know, they have a budget for the year, because we could adjust in those other areas if necessary, so that we could have continuity in the tour, you know, in that. But that's the way I feel about it. But you know, when that time comes, if we have to deal with it, we can deal with it. However, for me, that's really important.
Do we need action on this?
You can take action today, or you can, it's really up to you. If we want to move forward with kind of the timelines that we talked about in the work session and that, I would like action today. If we want to delay it, you know, we'll just move all of those dates and just let folks know that it's really uncertain, and we're just going to wait until we have more certainty. And I think either way is reasonable. They'll still continue, the chamber and the tourism will still continue to build their budgets. I'll still have them come in and see, make presentations in May, so you can hear what they're asking for. We just won't be able to give them any kind of commitment until, even a potential commitment, until we acted on this.
I would make a motion to approve the transient tax allocations for fiscal year 2020-21.
Second, but I'd almost, if you could amend that to kind of just say, but because the numbers are unknown.
For review in July.
I know that, yeah, just as, because I don't think we could have passed this as is, because we don't know. This was still a guess anyway, correct?
Right, you could make your motion contingent upon collections resuming.
I'll amend my motion contingent on collections resuming July, August, our highest CRT.
And I'll second the amendment. Thank you.
Been properly moved and seconded to approve the transient tax allocation for fiscal year 2020-21 contingent on collection of those taxes. Is there discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Scarpelli?
Aye.
Commissioner Berry? Aye. Commissioner Berry?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I'm being optimistic here.
Yeah, I think we've got to be.
Moving forward with a positive attitude.
Exactly, good. Anything else good of the order? Next meeting would be April 15th, which traditionally was tax day, but apparently it's not anymore. And right here.
Yes, and we did have on our potential calendar a work session for the 8th, but we're not aware of items, and given the climate, we thought it best to hold that, unless there's something I'm not aware of.
I don't have it.
Oh, one last thing,
Yes,
monumental. Today's the first day that the meeting's gone live. Thank you, Alex, for being
Yeah,
here,
thanks, Alex.
correct?
Yep,
It's never been
right.
televised before.
it's our pleasure. Thank you for working with us.
Thank you. And thank you to those on the phone. We are adjourned.